Colonel, are you aware, a tall man, probably 5'11", 6'0", moved into hospital room 1231 on SpaceBase Lima Victor November, LVN, started, that you are in the early stages of Bakir syndrome. I knew, without looking at him, that he possessed the most rugged features I'd ever seen on a man, that he shaved his jet black hair close to his head, that his long face sported a broad nose and soft blue eyes. I knew by hearing his voice. The very treble of his voice made my heart race and my pulse quicken. I shook my head. I couldn't let this happen again. Not now. Not ever. I had my LVN to worry about, and my kids, and my new partner. I could not let this man worm his way back into my heart and my life. How did he get on LVN, and why was he attending to me? In 2100, Earth's armed forces joined together to form a United Nations-like organization called the Freedom Alliance. However, in 2151, a faction of the Freedom Alliance no longer agreed with their rules and regulations, breaking away to create the Crimson Fleet, a collective committed to turning Earth into a one-world, totalitarian government, stripping away every person's right to choose what he will eat, drink, where she will live and what she would do for a living. The Freedom Alliance refused to allow that to happen, thus going to war with the Crimson Fleet. The space base I commanded set close to the front lines of the war, which allowed the frontline vessels to visit when they required more maintenance than could be repaired by their engineers. Their crew needed R&R or they had a medical or security problem larger than they could handle. In addition to being a colonel in the Freedom Alliance, I also solved cases in space for the Intergalactic Intelligence Bureau, IIB, a covert organization. I put my hand on my aching, bleeding arm and looked up to meet his gaze. Dr. Morgan, nice to see you again. I was wondering if you, maybe, could, I don't know, take the bullet out of my arm before we go over my medical history? Alex. My name escaped his lips as he let his eyes move up and down me. It's been a while, but we have a history. After all we have been through together, are we seriously going back to formalities like Dr. Morgan and Colonel Madrid? Can we dispense the standard "how have you been, tell me about your life since I saw you at that Intel cocktail party 14 years ago" portion? Drew, I persisted, holding his gaze, until after you, or maybe one of the other doctors, remove the bullet from my arm. And yes, in front of my crew, it will be Dr. Morgan and Colonel Madrid. Lay down, he instructed, hooking my arm up to a diag monitor, a machine that read a person's vitals and did a complete workup without taking a drop of blood. I moved my legs onto the bed and rested against the pillows. Still catching the bad people, I see. He studied my readings for a moment before requiring, "Will you need a local?" When he watched me shake my head, he remarked, "Same old Alex." Rather grit through the pain than to take anything. He took a scalpel and sterilized it before helping me remove my arm from the sleeve of my black flight coveralls. How did it happen? It happened while taking a person into custody. That's all I can tell you, I advised him as I watched him sterilize the area, then cut into my arm. He nodded and wondered, "How did you contract Bakir syndrome?" "That's only contracted in the remote parts of Tango 4. He picked up a long tweezer and searched the open wound for the bullet. I tilted my head and admitted, "I spent a month there. I was abducted by members of the Crimson Fleet for foiling one of their plots. It was not the whole truth, but a partial truth to prevent him from asking questions he shouldn't. Yes, I know about the neurological problems, the anemia and the fainting spells." He removed the bullet, dropping it into a basin with a click, then irrigated the wound. "Actually, I was going to ask if you knew about this cutting-edge drug that Drs. Amanda Weinhardt and Kendall Maxwell just got FDA approval on for Bakir syndrome." "Yeah, Dr. Weinhardt is visiting here tomorrow to get me started on it. She has been living on my friend Jessa's vessel. You remember Jessa, right?" When he nodded, I continued, "Jessa and her husband Nate contracted Jamon fever taking down a criminal. Dr. Weinhardt is treating Jessa with this promising drug that works better in women for whom the traditional Jamon fever therapy has stopped." I looked over at him and caught his eye. "What are you doing on LVN?" "I am your new chief medical officer." He searched my eyes for a moment. "You didn't know? How did you not know? You know everything that happens anywhere you serve." He stitched up the cut. He must have saw me press my lips together out of the corner of his eye because he exclaimed, "Oh my lands, you just came back from being held captive, didn't you? How long have you been back?" 2 hours, I admitted, closing my eyes briefly. I opened them and returned, "I haven't even seen my kids yet. My sister. My new partner is supposed to be here by now. I cannot believe the IIB has me babysitting one of their problem children." I rolled my eyes. From what I've heard, he sounds like an entitled rich man who expects everyone to clean up his messes just like Jessa did. That is so not happening here. "You have children?" he questioned, placing a bandage over the stitches. I nodded. "Yeah, I have 11-year-old twins, Dylan and Dakota. What about you?" "I was sorry to hear about Billy and Veronica. I know you were best friends with them." "I adopted their son Seth. He is 14. Are you married?" He glanced at my hand. "I don't see a ring. Is their dad still in the picture?" "You adopted Seth? It will be good for you to be responsible for someone besides yourself and your patients." I shrugged my shoulders and answered, looking over at him, "Their dad is Zay. You remember him, right?" When I caught the way he wrinkled his nose, I recalled the animosity between him and Isaiah Zay Grayson, my best friend since high school. He and I dated for a while and got married. We fought all the time. To save our friendship, we annulled the marriage 6 months later. By that time, I was already pregnant. He and I are better as friends. We know that. He works on board as my chief science officer. I get one of the best science officers in the Freedom Alliance, and the kids get time with their dad. It's a win-win situation. That must be interesting, working with your ex-husband, especially when one of you is dating someone else. He doesn't date anyone seriously, and I don't really have time for dating. Just then over his comlat, a wrist-worn communication device, a woman who I recognized as the head nurse, Clarissa Johnson, announced, "Dakota Grayson is here to see you again. She is complaining of another sore throat. I will set her up." "Nurse Johnson, can you bring her to my hospital room 1231, I answered for the doctor. "Colonel, I apologize, I did not know you were back," came her response. "I will bring her there as soon as I can." Before the doctor could ask another question, the doors of the room slid open and in ran a young girl with long, dark brown hair. She stood about 4'4" with a thin build and a long, broad nose and an ivory complexion. Her baby blue eyes lit up when she spotted me. She closed the gap between us and wrapped her arms around me. "Mom." She started to weep as I moved my good arm around her. "Be careful, Miss Grayson. I just took a bullet out of her arm. Let me go get an antibiotic for her." When I heard the doors swish behind him, I ventured, smoothing her hair, "Dax, what's wrong? You were gone for a month. Dad didn't know where you were and when you were coming back." He tried to act calm, but Dill and I knew he was worried. "I was so scared. I'm so glad you are home." "Sweetheart," I advised, pulling her away so I could see her, "some bad people held me captive, but no matter what happens, I will always do everything in my power to get back to you and your brother. I will never leave you alone. That's why your dad lives on LVN with us." I wiped her tears away with my thumb. "You feeling okay? I heard you have been coming in here with sore throats. How is it now?" She studied me. I could see her debating in her head, knowing this conversation could quickly turn very right or very wrong. "Let me guess, your throat feels fine now that you know I am back and okay," I interpreted, running my fingers through her hair. When she nodded, I kissed her head. Just then the doctor walked back in with a bag. "I hope I am not interrupting." He looked over at Dax and prompted, "You did not tell me that you were Alexandra Madrid's daughter, that your mom was the commander of the LVN. Do you know my mom?" "The first time I met your mother was in my chemistry class at the academy. She had the same long, wavy, blondish brown hair," he proceeded, hooking the bag up to and for, pulled into a ponytail and these incredible, connecting the drip to my arm, deep cobalt blue eyes that the males in the room used to get lost in. He turned to look at me, then moved his eyes to Dax. She was my chemistry partner that semester. I had such a crush on her, and so did most of the guys. She was all business, though. She was there to become a Freedom Alliance officer. Nothing more. Nothing less. Most of the single guys have a crush on her here too, but she won't give them the time of day, except," Dax replied, rolling her eyes, "that man who comes here all the time that Grandma wants her to marry." "She is still trying to get you to marry that lock guy," the doctor countered, waiting until I met his gaze. "She is persistent, isn't she? She didn't even let up when I married Zay. She is afraid I will end up with no one to take care of me and the kids because I am wasting my life on my career. According to her, a woman needs to be married and contributing to her husband's career. This is not the 1500s. I'm doing fine with my 2 jobs and raising my kids." "Speaking of guys, Mom," Dax interjected, resting her head on my shoulder, "there is this tall, good-looking guy who has been looking for you. Says his name is Antonio or something. I invited him to dinner when you came back. He has been hanging out a lot with Aunt Abby." I retrieved my Quan Pad, a device that held the memory of an entire quantum computer. I called up a picture of my new partner. I turned it to face her. "Is this the man?" I watched her nod. "That's my new partner. Mr. Ashton, to you and your brother." Drew met my eyes and asked, "As in?" I nodded and put my finger to my lips. "Let's not tell my mother because he is single and famous. He would be the one person to get her off me marrying Locke and onto marrying him. I've heard too many stories about my new partner to even think about getting involved. Unfortunately, my sister doesn't have that much sense." I looked over at Dax. "He is Rena and Caleb's biological father." "The deadbeat drunk is your new partner?" Drew laughed. "Dax." She shrugged. "You taught me to be honest. She is definitely your daughter. She reminds me of you before you became jaded." "I am not jaded. I just have experience more than most people," I protested, catching his eye. The hairs on my arms stood up. Something happened. I removed myself from the diagon monitor. I grabbed the 4th pole and rushed through the doors and navigated my way to the front entrance just as Maddox rolled in a gurney with a man with thick, severely brushed, jet black hair and dark brown eyes on it. His eyes now blackened. Marks marred his rugged features. Blood covered his thin lips and goatee. My heart raced as I surveyed the man's torn white, long-sleeved shirt and jeans. What happened to him? Was he on his way to see me? Why else would he visit LVN? "Do you know this man?" one of the blonde-haired female medics asked, watching me.